The market square buzzed with noise. People shouted, animals bleated, and the smell of spices hung heavy in the air. Zaina, a girl of 18 with bright eyes and a quick smile, stood amongst the other slaves. She tried to hold her head high, but the shame weighed on her like a stone. Her heart pounded in her chest like a trapped bird. She watched as others were bought and sold, their fates decided with the clink of coins. She knew her turn was coming. She clutched her worn shawl tighter, hiding the small crescent and star birthmark on her shoulder. It was a secret mark, a reminder of a life she barely remembered. The auctioneer, a man named Naji with a slick smile and oily hair, gestured towards her. His voice boomed across the square. "Here we have a strong young girl, fit for any task," he proclaimed. He pinched her arm, forcing a smile onto her face. "Bid now, good people. Don't miss this opportunity," the crowd murmured. Zaina felt their eyes on her, judging her worth. A few coins were offered, but none were enough to satisfy Naji. He frowned, impatient. He wanted to move on to the more valuable slaves. Finally, a passing merchant tossed a single tarnished coin towards him. It landed with a dull thud in the dust. Naji looked at the coin, then at Zaina. He sneered. "Sold," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain. He grabbed her arm roughly and shoved her towards the merchant. "Here's your property," he said. "One coin well spent." The merchant, a fat man with a sweaty face, grunted and took hold of Zaina's arm. He pulled her away from the platform into the swirling crowd. The single coin, the price of her freedom lost, felt heavier than any chain. Zaina stumbled along, her eyes fixed on the ground. The bustling market, once a place of vibrant life, now seemed like a cage. Each step she took felt like a betrayal of the life she once knew, a life now lost for the price of a single tarnished coin. Sheikh Saleh rode into the market square, his presence immediately commanding attention. He sat tall on his black stallion, his white robes billowing in the desert wind. He was a man of quiet strength, his dark eyes sharp and intelligent. He had come to the market not to buy slaves, but to seek a solution. He carried with him an ancient treaty, a fragile document that held the key to uniting two warring tribes. The treaty spoke of a lost princess, a girl marked by the heavens, who would bring peace to the land. He searched the faces in the crowd, hoping to find some clue, some sign that would lead him to her. He saw the auctioneer, Naji, his loud voice echoing across the square. He saw the slaves lined up, their faces etched with fear and resignation. And then he saw Zaina. He watched as she was sold for a single coin, the disdain in Naji's voice clear, even from a distance. Something about her caught his attention. Her spirit, despite her circumstances, seemed unbroken. He saw a flicker of defiance in her eyes, a spark of something special. Saleh dismounted his stallion and approached the merchant who had just purchased Zaina. The merchant, still clutching her arm, looked up in surprise. Saleh's presence commanded respect, and the merchant stammered a greeting. "May peace be upon you, Sheikh Saleh," he mumbled, bowing his head slightly. "And upon you," Saleh replied. His voice was calm but firm. "I wish to purchase this girl from you." The merchant blinked, surprised. He looked at Zaina, then back at Saleh. "But I just bought her," he stammered, "for a single coin." Saleh reached into his pouch and withdrew a handful of gold coins. He offered them to the merchant. "This should be more than adequate compensation," he said. The merchant's eyes widened at the sight of the gold. He quickly snatched the coins, his earlier disdain for Zaina forgotten. "Of course, Sheikh Saleh," he said, bowing deeply. "She is yours." He released Zaina's arm and scurried away, his pockets jingling with gold. Saleh turned to Zaina. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. He offered her a gentle smile. "Come with me," he said. "You are free." Zaina found herself in Sheikh Saleh's encampment. a collection of colorful tents nestled amongst the dunes. It was a far cry from the harsh reality of the slave market. She was given a small tent of her own, a simple space, but a welcome refuge. She was unsure of what was expected of her. She was no longer a slave, but she wasn't quite free either. She felt like a bird with clipped wings, confined to a gilded cage. Saleh observed Zaina from a distance. He watched how she quickly adapted to camp life, helping with chores and offering a kind word to everyone she met. He saw her resilience, her ability to find joy even in the smallest things. He was intrigued by her spirit, by the strength that shone through despite her hardships. He found himself drawn to her quiet dignity, her infectious smile that could brighten even the dreariest day. Zaina, in turn, found herself stealing glances at Saleh. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He treated everyone with respect, his leadership evident in the way his tribe looked to him for guidance. She felt a sense of safety in his presence, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Their paths crossed often, brief exchanges of words during daily tasks. A simple question about the weather, a shared smile over a playful desert fox. These small moments began to weave a delicate thread of connection between them. The whispers of their growing bond, though unspoken, echoed through the stillness of the desert camp. The desert sun beat down relentlessly. Zaina, seeking respite from the heat, wandered away from the camp. She followed a narrow, winding path that led her to a hidden oasis. A small waterfall tumbled down mossy rocks, creating a pool of cool, clear water. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, offering a welcome shade. Zaina slipped off her sandals and waded into the water. She dipped her head beneath the surface, letting the cool water wash away the dust and grime of the journey. She closed her eyes, enjoying the moment of peace, the solitude, a rare luxury. She untied her shawl, letting it fall to the ground, and the crescent and star birthmark on her shoulder gleamed in the dappled sunlight. Saleh, noticing Zaina's absence, grew concerned. He set out to find her, following the faint tracks in the sand. The path led him to the hidden oasis. He saw her shawl lying on the ground and heard the gentle splash of water. He approached cautiously, not wanting to disturb her peaceful solitude. He peered through the foliage and saw Zaina standing beneath the waterfall, the water cascading over her shoulders. The sunlight caught the birthmark on her shoulder, making it shimmer like a celestial jewel. Saleh gasped. He recognized the crescent and star symbol. It was identical to the seal on the ancient treaty, the mark of the lost princess. He realized with a jolt that the girl he had bought for a single coin was the key to uniting the tribes, the princess who was prophesied to bring peace to the land. Saleh returned to his tent, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the image of the birthmark. Its celestial shape burned into his memory. He called for his most trusted advisor, a wizened old man named Omar. Omar entered the tent, his face etched with concern. "You seem troubled, Saleh," he said. Saleh gestured for Omar to sit. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice low. "I have discovered something extraordinary." He told Omar about the birthmark on Zaina's shoulder, how it matched the seal on the ancient treaty. He explained his belief that Zaina was the lost princess. Omar listened intently, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is unexpected," he said slowly. "If true, it changes everything." He considered the implications, the potential for peace, but also the dangers that lay ahead. "We must be cautious," he warned. "This news, if it spreads too soon, could create unrest. We must confirm her identity before we reveal anything." Unbeknownst to them, Zaina had returned from the oasis. She stood outside Saleh's tent, her heart pounding in her chest. She had overheard snippets of their conversation, the words birthmark, princess, and treaty swirling in her mind. She pressed her ear against the tent flap, straining to hear more. Could they be talking about her? Could the strange mark on her shoulder be more than just a birthmark? A wave of confusion washed over her. Her past, always shrouded in mystery, suddenly felt even more uncertain. She slipped away quietly, the whispers she'd overheard planting seeds of doubt and wonder in her heart. Saleh, lost in conversation with Omar, was unaware of her presence, unaware of the secret she now carried within her. He paced back and forth, his mind grappling with the enormity of the revelation. How could he reveal this truth to Zaina? How could he convince his tribe to accept a slave girl as their princess? News of Zaina's potential royal lineage spread through the camp like wildfire. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Some looked at her with awe, others with suspicion. The elders of Saleh's tribe were particularly troubled. They gathered in a circle, their faces grim. "This girl, a princess," one elder scoffed. "It's a preposterous notion. Saleh has been deceived." "Perhaps it is a clever ploy by a rival tribe," another elder suggested. "A way to infiltrate our camp, to sow discord among us." They grumbled amongst themselves, their trust in Saleh shaken. They feared this supposed princess was a threat, a pawn in a larger game of power. Saleh felt the shift in the atmosphere. He sensed the growing unease within his tribe. He knew he had to act quickly, to quell their doubts before they turned into open rebellion. He also worried about Zaina. She was caught in the crossfire of suspicion and speculation, a fragile flower in a storm of doubt. He had to protect her, not just from external threats, but from the weight of a truth she might not be ready to bear. Naji, the auctioneer, observed the growing unrest from afar. He had returned to the nearby town, his pockets still heavy with the gold he had received for Zaina. He cursed his foolishness. He had sold a princess for a pittance, a mistake that could cost him dearly. But then a cunning glint appeared in his eyes. This chaos, this uncertainty, could be turned to his advantage. He knew the rival warlords would pay handsomely for a princess, a bargaining chip in their ongoing power struggles. He saw an opportunity to profit from the very situation he had inadvertently created. A dark smile spread across his face as he began to formulate a plan. Naji wasted no time. He sought out a group of rough-looking men, mercenaries known for their ruthlessness and discretion. He offered them a substantial sum of gold, enough to buy their loyalty and silence. He laid out his plan: kidnap Zaina from Saleh's camp and deliver her to a designated meeting point. From there, she would be sold to the highest bidder among the rival warlords. He knew Saleh's camp would be heavily guarded, so he devised a strategy to create confusion and chaos. He paid a local storyteller to spread rumors throughout the camp, tales of Zaina's supposed magical powers and her connection to ancient curses. He hoped these whispers would further destabilize the tribe, creating division and distrust among Saleh's people. He knew fear was a powerful weapon, and he intended to use it to his advantage. Saleh, sensing the growing tension, increased security around Zaina. He assigned his most trusted guards to protect her, their watchful eyes constantly scanning the horizon. He felt the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. He had to protect Zaina, not only from Naji's greed, but from the storm of doubt that threatened to engulf his tribe. He knew time was running out. The whispers were becoming louder, the shadows of Naji's plot lengthening across the desert sands. He prepared for the inevitable confrontation, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the peace he so desperately sought was hanging precariously in the balance. Night fell over the desert camp, cloaking everything in shadows. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of the wind and the occasional howl of a distant jackal. Naji's men, their faces hidden by dark cloths, crept towards the camp. They moved silently, like shadows themselves, their movements practiced and precise. They waited for the signal, a single hoot of an owl, the prearranged sign that the rumors had taken hold and chaos reigned within. The owl hooted, its mournful cry echoing through the night. Naji's men sprang into action. They stormed the camp, their swords flashing in the moonlight. Shouts erupted, the peaceful stillness shattered by the clang of steel and the cries of surprise. Saleh, alerted by the commotion, grabbed his sword and rushed towards Zaina's tent. He found her standing inside, her eyes wide with fear. "We have to go," he said, his voice urgent. "Now." He grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the tent. They ran through the camp, dodging the fighting, the air thick with the smell of blood and smoke. Naji's men, seeing their target, pursued them relentlessly. Arrows whizzed past their heads, embedding themselves in the sand. Saleh, shielding Zaina with his body, led her towards the edge of the camp, towards the vast expanse of the desert. They plunged into the darkness, the sounds of the fighting fading behind them. They ran as fast as their legs could carry them, the desert sand shifting beneath their feet. Zaina, her breath coming in ragged gasps, stumbled. Saleh caught her, his grip firm. "We can't stop," he urged. "They'll be right behind us." He could hear the pounding of hooves in the distance, the relentless pursuit of Naji and his men. As they ran, Zaina looked back at the chaos they were leaving behind. She saw the flames engulfing the tents, the shadows of men locked in mortal combat. She realized, with a chilling certainty, that her life was no longer her own. The whispers she had overheard, the rumors that had swirled around her, they all pointed to a destiny she had never imagined. The fear in her heart began to give way to a strange sense of acceptance. Perhaps she was more than just a slave girl sold for a single coin. Perhaps she truly was a princess, a girl marked by the heavens, destined for something greater than she could have ever dreamed. The desert stretched before them, an endless expanse of sand and rock under the pale moonlight. Saleh and Zaina ran until their lungs burned and their legs ached. They finally stumbled into a narrow canyon, its steep walls offering a momentary respite from their pursuers. They collapsed against the cool rock, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Saleh peered out of the canyon's mouth, scanning the horizon. He could see the faint glow of torches in the distance, flickering like fireflies in the darkness. Naji and his men were still on their trail. "We need to find a better hiding place," Saleh said, his voice strained. "They'll find us here eventually." Zaina nodded, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She looked at Saleh, her gaze searching his face. "Who are they?" she whispered. "Why are they after me?" Saleh hesitated. He knew he couldn't keep the truth from her any longer. "They want you because they believe you are someone important," he said carefully. "Someone of royal blood." Zaina stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend his words. "Royal blood," she repeated. "But I'm just a slave girl. I was sold for a single coin." Saleh placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That may be how your life began, Zaina," he said gently. "But it is not who you are. You are more than that." He told her about the birthmark on her shoulder, how it matched the seal on the ancient treaty, the mark of the lost princess. Zaina listened in stunned silence, her mind reeling. The whispers she had overheard, the rumors that had plagued her, they were all true. She was a princess, stolen from her family, her identity hidden for years. A wave of emotions washed over her, disbelief, confusion, and a flicker of hope. "But how can I be a princess?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't remember anything. I've always been just Zaina." Saleh looked at her, his eyes filled with compassion. "We will find out the truth," he promised. "Together." He knew they were facing a formidable challenge. They had to escape Naji's clutches, prove Zaina's identity, and convince his tribe to accept her as their princess. It was a daunting task, but he was determined to succeed. He had to, not only for Zaina, but for the future of his people, for the peace that hung precariously in the balance. "We need to reach out to my allies in the neighboring tribes," Saleh said, his voice firm. "They can help us. They can provide us with shelter and support." He looked at Zaina, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We will find a way, Zaina. We will expose Naji and reclaim your rightful place." Saleh led Zaina deeper into the canyon, following a narrow, winding path that led to a hidden cave. The cave was small but dry and sheltered from the wind. He hoped it would provide them with temporary refuge while he formulated a plan. He knew they couldn't stay there long. Naji and his men would be searching the area, their torches casting long, flickering shadows across the desert floor. "I need to retrieve something from the camp," Saleh said, his voice low. "Something that might help us prove your identity." He explained to Zaina about the ancient treaty chest, a heavy, ornately carved box that held the treaty and other important artifacts. He believed it might contain further clues, further proof of Zaina's royal lineage. Leaving Zaina hidden in the cave, Saleh slipped back towards the encampment, his movements cautious and silent. He navigated the familiar terrain, avoiding the patrols of Naji's men. He reached his tent, now a smoldering ruin, and carefully sifted through the debris. He found the treaty chest, miraculously unscathed by the fire. He lifted it, its weight reassuringly familiar, and made his way back to the cave, his heart pounding with anticipation. He placed the chest on the cave floor, its carved surface gleaming in the dim light. He opened the lid, revealing the ancient treaty, its parchment yellowed and brittle with age. He showed it to Zaina, pointing to the crescent and star seal that matched her birthmark. Zaina examined the treaty, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the chest. She noticed a small irregularity on one side, a slight indentation that seemed out of place. She pressed her finger against it, and a small section of the chest clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside the compartment, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a pendant. It was a delicate piece of gold, shaped like a crescent moon and a star, identical to her birthmark and the treaty seal. Zaina gasped, her fingers trembling as she lifted the pendant. It felt warm against her skin, as if it had been waiting for her, waiting to be found. She looked at Saleh, her eyes wide with wonder. Could this be the final piece of the puzzle, the undeniable proof of her true identity? Saleh, seeing the pendant, knew they had found what they were looking for. He explained to Zaina that he had sent messages to his allies in the neighboring tribes, asking for their assistance. He had told them of his discovery, of the girl with the crescent and star birthmark, and of the ancient treaty that spoke of a lost princess. He hoped they would recognize the significance of the pendant, that they would remember the events surrounding the princess's disappearance. As dawn broke, casting a warm glow over the desert landscape, Saleh and Zaina saw a group of riders approaching. They were Saleh's allies, led by a tall, imposing warrior named Tariq. Tariq dismounted his horse and embraced Saleh warmly. "We received your message," he said. "We came as quickly as we could." But Saleh introduced Zaina to Tariq and his companions. He explained about the pendant she had found, how it matched her birthmark and the treaty seal. He then asked if any of them recognized the pendant, if it held any significance for them. Several of the elders who had accompanied Tariq gasped. They stepped forward, their eyes fixed on the pendant that Zaina held in her hand. One elder, a woman with silver hair and wise eyes, reached out and gently touched the pendant. "This," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "this is the symbol of the royal family of the neighboring kingdom. This pendant, I remember it. It was worn by the princess, the little girl who disappeared years ago. The other elders murmured in agreement, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and recognition. They recounted the story of the peace banquet held years ago between their tribes and the neighboring kingdom. They remembered the little princess, a bright, cheerful child who had charmed everyone with her infectious laughter. They remembered the horror and confusion when she vanished without a trace, presumed kidnapped by enemies of peace. Zaina listened to their stories, her heart pounding in her chest. Fragments of memories began to surface, fleeting images of a grand hall, brightly colored banners, and the warm embrace of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She looked down at the pendant in her hand, its familiar shape resonating with something deep within her. She began to believe, truly believe, that she was the lost princess, the girl who had been stolen from her family and her rightful place. A sense of belonging, a feeling she had never known before, began to bloom within her heart. She was no longer just Zaina, the slave girl sold for a single coin. She was a princess, a symbol of hope and unity, destined to bring peace to the warring tribes. Saleh gathered his tribe and the allied tribes in the large open space between the canyons. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sand, and a hush fell over the assembled crowd as Saleh stepped forward. He held Zaina's hand, leading her to the center of the circle. She wore the pendant, its golden surface gleaming in the sunlight. He looked at his people, his eyes filled with conviction. "I have brought you here today to reveal a truth that will change the course of our history," he announced, his voice strong and clear. "This woman, Zaina, whom many of you know as a slave, is in fact the lost princess of the neighboring kingdom." He recounted the events that had led to this discovery, from the moment he bought Zaina in the market to the discovery of the pendant in the treaty chest. He pointed to the birthmark on Zaina's shoulder, its crescent and star shape mirroring the pendant and the treaty seal. He explained how the elders of the allied tribes had recognized the pendant, how they had recounted the story of the princess's disappearance years ago. He then turned to Zaina. "Tell them what you remember," he encouraged her gently. Zaina took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at the faces in the crowd, their expressions ranging from disbelief to curiosity. She closed her eyes, trying to grasp the elusive fragments of her past. I remember a large hall," she said, her voice hesitant. There were bright banners hanging from the ceiling and music filled the air. I remember a woman. She was wearing a beautiful gown, and she had kind eyes. She held me close, and I felt safe. She opened her eyes, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "I remember playing in a garden filled with flowers," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "There was a fountain in the center, and I used to splash in the water. I remember a man with a kind smile. He called me his little star." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't remember much else," she whispered, but these memories feel real. They feel like home." Several elders from the allied tribes stepped forward, their faces etched with emotion. The elder woman who had first recognized the pendant spoke again, her voice filled with wonder. "The princess. She had a favorite doll, a small wooden doll with painted eyes. She carried it everywhere." She looked at Zaina, her gaze searching. "Do you remember such a doll, child?" Zaina closed her eyes, searching her memories. A faint image flickered in her mind, a small wooden doll with bright, painted eyes. She clutched the pendant tighter, as if drawing strength from it. "Yes," she whispered, I think I remember a doll, a wooden doll, with painted eyes." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another elder, a tall, thin man with a long white beard, spoke. "The princess. She had a small birthmark on her hand, shaped like a tiny bird." He looked at Zaina intently. "Do you have such a mark?" Zaina looked down at her hand. She had never noticed it before, but there, on the back of her hand, was a small, faint birthmark, shaped like a tiny bird in flight. She held up her hand, showing it to the assembled tribes. A gasp went through the crowd. The elder woman stepped closer to Zaina. Her eyes filled with tears as she reached out and gently cupped Zaina's face in her hands. "It is you," she whispered. "You are the lost princess. You have returned to us." The other elders crowded around Zaina, their voices filled with joy and relief. They embraced her, welcoming her back into the fold. They recounted more stories of her childhood, of her playful nature, and her infectious laughter. They spoke of the grief and despair they had felt when she disappeared, and of the hope they had never given up, the hope that one day she would return. Saleh watched the scene unfold, his heart filled with gratitude. He had found the lost princess, the key to uniting the warring tribes. He had fulfilled the prophecy of the ancient treaty, and he had brought peace to the land. He looked at Zaina, her face radiant with joy and wonder, and he knew that he had found something even more precious than peace. He had found love. Naji stood before the assembled tribes, his usual swagger replaced by a trembling fear. He was surrounded by Saleh's guards, their faces grim and unforgiving. He glanced nervously at the faces in the crowd, their eyes burning with anger and betrayal. He saw the elders, their expressions stern and unwavering. He saw Zaina, standing tall and proud beside Saleh, the pendant gleaming on her chest. He knew his game was up. Saleh addressed the crowd, his voice resonant with authority. "Naji, you stand accused of a grave crime," he declared. "You stole a princess, a child entrusted to our care during a time of peace. You traded her life, her identity, for a handful of coins." He held up the single, tarnished coin that had been the price of Zaina's freedom. "This coin represents your greed, your treachery, and your utter disregard for human life." He turned to Naji, his gaze piercing. "Confess your crimes, Naji. Tell the truth, and perhaps you will find some measure of mercy." Naji swallowed nervously, his throat dry. He looked at the faces in the crowd, their expressions unwavering. He knew he couldn't lie his way out of this. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I bought her," he confessed, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I bought her from a beggar woman in the market. She was just a baby then, a tiny thing wrapped in rags. I didn't know who she was. I thought I could ransom her back to her family, get a hefty sum of gold." He paused, his eyes darting around the crowd. But then, I lost my nerve," he continued, his voice cracking. "I was afraid. I kept her hidden, moving her from place to place, always looking over my shoulder. The years passed, and I forgot about the ransom. I just wanted to be rid of her." He looked at Zaina, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and shame. I sold her in the market," he confessed, his voice barely audible, "for a single coin. I didn't know she was a princess. I swear, I didn't know." A wave of outrage swept through the crowd. Murmurs of disgust and anger rippled through the assembled tribes. Naji cowered, his body trembling with fear. He had confessed his crimes, but his confession offered little comfort to those who had been betrayed by his greed and deceit. The single coin, the symbol of his treachery, now weighed heavier than any judgment he could face. He had traded a princess's life for a pittance, and now he would pay the price. Saleh turned to the assembled tribes, his voice ringing with authority. "Naji has confessed his crimes," he declared. "He has admitted to stealing a princess, a child of peace, and selling her into slavery." He looked at the elders of both tribes. "What is to be done with this man?" The elders conferred amongst themselves, their faces grave. Finally, The elder woman who had recognized Zaina stepped forward. "Naji has committed a terrible crime," she said. "He has violated the sacred bonds of trust between our tribes. He has brought shame upon us all." She looked at Naji, her eyes filled with sorrow. "He must be punished, but his punishment must also serve as a reminder of the importance of peace and unity." It was decided that Naji would be banished from both tribes. He would be stripped of his possessions and forced to wander the desert, a reminder to all of the consequences of greed and betrayal. The gold he had received for Zaina was returned to Saleh, who distributed it amongst the poorest members of both tribes. With Naji's fate decided, the attention turned to Zaina. The king and queen of the neighboring kingdom arrived, their faces etched with a mixture of joy and relief. They had received word of their daughter's discovery, and they had come to reclaim their lost child. They embraced Zaina, their tears of happiness mingling with hers. They showered her with love and apologies, their hearts overflowing with gratitude for her safe return. Zaina looked at her parents, their faces now familiar, their love a warm embrace that enveloped her. She felt a sense of belonging, a connection she had never known before. But she also looked at Saleh, the man who had bought her freedom, the man who had protected her and helped her discover her true identity. She saw in his eyes a love that mirrored her own, a love that transcended titles and social standing. She turned to her parents, her voice clear and strong. "I am grateful to you, my mother and father, for welcoming me back," she said. "But my heart belongs here, with Saleh and his people. I choose to stay." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. The king and queen looked at each other, their faces etched with concern, but they also saw the love in Zaina's eyes, the unwavering conviction in her voice. They knew they could not force her to return to a life she no longer remembered, a life that no longer felt like her own. The king stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. "We understand your decision, my daughter," he said. "We will respect your wishes. Your happiness is all that matters." He embraced Saleh, a gesture of acceptance and unity. "We are grateful to you for protecting our daughter," he said. "You have brought her back to us, and you have brought peace to our lands." Zaina smiled, her heart filled with joy. She had found her family, both her birth family and the family she had chosen. She had found her place in the world, a place where she could be true to herself, a place where she could use her newfound identity to bring peace and prosperity to the land. The single coin that had once been the price of her freedom now seemed like a distant memory, a reminder of the journey that had led her to this moment of joy and reunion. The wedding of Sheikh Saleh and Princess Zaina was a celebration unlike any other the desert tribes had ever witnessed. Banners of vibrant colors, representing both tribes, adorned the newly rebuilt encampment. The air filled with the scent of roasting meats and sweet dates, and music drifted on the desert breeze. People from both tribes mingled freely, their earlier suspicions replaced by a shared sense of joy and unity. The king and queen of the neighboring kingdom sat beside Saleh's tribal elders, their faces beaming with pride. Zaina, radiant in a gown woven with gold thread, stood beside Saleh. He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and admiration. He took her hand, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. The elder woman who had recognized Zaina performed the ceremony, her voice filled with emotion. She spoke of the ancient prophecy, of the lost princess who would bring peace to the land. She spoke of the love that had blossomed between Saleh and Zaina, a love that had transcended boundaries and united two warring tribes. As the ceremony concluded, Saleh took a small, unassuming ring from his finger. It was a simple band of gold, crafted from the single tarnished coin that had once been the price of Zaina's freedom. He had melted down the coin, the symbol of her past hardship, and transformed it into a symbol of their enduring love and the unity they had forged. He slipped the ring onto Zaina's finger, its smooth surface a testament to the transformation they had both undergone. "This ring," Saleh said, his voice filled with emotion, "represents not only our love, but also the unity of our tribes. It is a reminder that even the smallest, most insignificant thing can be transformed into something beautiful and meaningful." Zaina looked at the ring, its simple elegance a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. She saw in it not just a symbol of their love, but a symbol of hope, a reminder that even from the darkest of circumstances, something beautiful could emerge. The celebrations continued late into the night, the desert sky ablaze with stars. Saleh and Zaina, hand in hand, moved among their people, their faces radiating joy and gratitude. They had brought their tribes together, not through force or conquest, but through love and understanding. Together, they would rule wisely and justly, bringing prosperity and unity to their people. The single coin that had once bought Zaina's freedom had been transformed into a symbol of their enduring love, a ring of unity that would bind their tribes together for generations to come. And the story of the princess who was sold for a single coin, only to be recognized by the Sheikh who saw the royal birthmark on her shoulder, would be told and retold around desert campfires, a timeless tale of love, resilience, and the power of unity.